Okay. Okay, everybody. So let's meet our next speaker, Mario Loriedo. He is a software engineer at Red Hat who is committing for the open source project Eclipse Che, and he will tell us more about its integration with OpenShift. Let's welcome.
Thank you. Unmute.
Thank you for coming. So we're gonna talk briefly about Eclipse Che. Actually, who has used Che here? Is somebody? Okay. Yes. So I'm gonna hopefully I've added a short intro of Eclipse Che. That's a presentation that I already did a couple of months ago. That was the DevConf, so everybody had used Che for that. So I removed this introduction that time, but so I added here. So we are gonna see what is Che, what it does, how it works. And so we're going to see also the value of using Che with OpenShift and the other way around. So what's the value for an OpenShift user to have Che integrated with OpenShift? And after that, we're going to do a couple of demo to see what we are working on. And we are going to have also a little surprise at the end of the talk. Okay, so what is Che? Except it may remind you a revolutionary a person of history of Central America, but actually the name doesn't come from there, and it's a web IDE that has the look and feel of the all common modern IDEs, and that is based on container. And we just released version 5.0 a couple of weeks ago, and the reaction was enthusiastic for the fact that we made it really easier now to install Che. So to install Che, the only thing that you have to do is to have a container engine, so Docker, installed on your machine. That's Docker now, but tomorrow we'll be able also to use OpenShift. Instead of having Docker, we'll have as a prerequisite OpenShift. But for now, the easiest way to install Che is to have Docker and to run just a Docker run command like this one to start it. So let's do that. Can you see? Is it yes? Okay. So the command is docker run Eclipse Che. We are gonna also use the nightly version. So the one that has been built yesterday. So when you do that, actually it says it wants a command. So it proposes you some comments to the usage of the CLI, and so we're not going through that. And actually, I'm gonna use. Okay, this command here. So I have some options to use a folder to store my the data, so the data of the workspaces, and to also run it faster because we don't want to lose too much time here. So once you do that, you start a container that in a few seconds starts Che. Actually, what Che is another container that will run. So that's a container that will start a new container after some checks. So what's the point of having a container that starts a container? Actually, the first container, the CLI, is going to do some checks. What is the operating system we're using? If we're running inside a VM or outside a VM, if there is a firewall, proxy, etc., and we'll do the configuration to start the Che container with the right parameters. So once it has finished, we can access to the IDE using that URL. So let's look at that. Okay, so we have Che installed here, up and running. And also you can see that he has loaded some data that I had, so some old workspaces that I was working on before. So the other interesting thing about Che is that it comes with some ready-to-go stacks. So you got some ready-to-go development environment for different languages, and it comes also with some code examples, so that you have already in a few seconds you can start a new project with some code that builds, it can be tested. And so that's a good way to bootstrap a project. So let's see that. Here, we can select the Create Workspace button, and we can select the existing stacks. So as you see, there are a lot of stacks here. What we can do is that we can select the Java on CentOS. So, and what is happening here is that is Che that is running in the container is going to bootstrap some new containers. These containers will be containers to be able to run, to build the source code. So in this case, we're going to use the Java workspace. So it will be a container that comes with Maven, with the JDK version 8. So everything we need to all the tools we need to do Java development. Okay, a few seconds. Okay. So that's an IDE. You have everything you can expect from an IDE. Like for example, so yes, we have autocomplete, debug, test, refactor, etc., etc. So as you see, it's easy to start a new project, and it's also easy. And you have also advanced tools that you can find in desktop IDEs. So let's do a sample. Let's try to debug an application. Let's see how it works. So I'm gonna start another container where I add a web application that will be more interesting to debug. So I'm gonna restart it to restart this workspace. So what it's doing now is it's creating a new container, because every time it stops a container, it just destroys the container, and when we need it again, it just creates a new container, and it loads the data from the file system. Okay. Okay. Okay, so if you you probably already know that's the application that we are going to debug is the pet clinic application. That's a sample that you can find on Spring Source website. What we are going to test is we are going to put a breakpoint on the service implementation. Okay, so we already have one. What we are going to do is we're going to start Tomcat in debug mode. So we are going to first of all we're going to build and to copy. So from the source file, we're going to generate the Word file, and we're going to copy it in the Tomcat folder. That's a command that already comes with that you can define custom commands. So for this particular project, the build process build the Word file and copied that on a Tomcat folder, so that later on we'll be able to execute it, to test it, and to debug it. That's just a Maven build. Hopefully it's going to finish soon. So just to see something else waiting at the compilation end. So what we can, if we do a Docker PS here, we can see that we have a couple of containers, this one and this one. Maybe if you reduce, we could see that better. That are these are two workspaces, actually the two running workspaces. First one and second one. And this one is the Che server. So the Che server is listening on port 8080. And as you can see, the workspaces are listening in a lot of ports. So they are exposing port 22, port 4401, etc., etc. This is interesting because when we need to port that to integrate that on OpenShift, we need to be careful because a container here need to expose a lot of ports, and these ports are ephemeral ports. So we currently we cannot interact with workspaces using port 80. So when we expose a service on OpenShift, we need to export an ephemeral port, and so that's something that needs privileged access for the container that we need, so for the workspace container. Okay, so the build has ended, and we are able now to store Tomcat in debug mode. Okay, great. So yes, we need to find the port that maps port 8080 of Tomcat. So now if we just yes, we should be. So we can debug. So now we can see our application. We have started it. Let's try to debug it. Okay. We have set. We should have set the breakpoints. Okay, so we have removed that. Let's set it again. Oops. Okay. So if we call find owner, oh. Has not been, so yeah, okay, should be better like this. Okay, so finally he stopped here. So you can see that the variable last name, here we can see here all the variable. You can see that last name is Mario, so that's the value that we passed. So actually, so we can debug as we can debug on other IDEs. It's certainly more the user experience is not the user experience that we are used to with desktop IDE, but we are moving forward. Every month we are doing progress on that. So the project is evolving really, really fast. And so we are also going to see from the point of view of OpenShift what we are doing. Okay, so let's see. Now we have seen what Che is, what it does, and why a Che user should be interested in using OpenShift. Well, first of all, is because we have seen that Che, the only prerequisite that Che has is having Docker running. But if you just need to run it locally, that's not a big issue. You can install Docker. But if you want to run it on your enterprise and you want to share your development environment amongst all the developers of your enterprise, you probably want to secure it to have a secure Docker, and OpenShift already comes with a secure Docker. And it comes also with Kubernetes that allows you to do containers orchestration, and with some runtime environments that will be useful for developers that are using Che to be able to deploy on a prod-like environment. And for the orchestration point of view, the cool thing is having OpenShift. It automatically makes Che scalable. This means that if you don't have an orchestrator, if you don't have OpenShift or Kubernetes running here, you will have all your workspaces that will run on the same node where your Che server is running. If you're going to use OpenShift, your workspaces will be automatically dispatched on all the nodes of your OpenShift cluster, and you will be able to scale and have a lot more workspaces running. Other thing is that you automatically have high availability for Che. So if you have one node that needs maintenance and you have to turn off, you will be able to move all your containers, so the Che server and also the workspaces, to a new node of OpenShift, and then turn off your node, the node you want to update, without losing availability for Che. So these are the benefits for a Che user. So a Che user can be interested to have on his enterprise an installation with OpenShift. But why an OpenShift user should be interested to have Che? So the first thing is that with desktop IDEs, we always need to install a lot. Every developer needs to install a lot of stuff on his laptop. So I need to install the JDK, Maven, the IDE, and every developer that will integrate the theme will need to spend some time installing all the dependency. And the environment for one developer will never be exactly the same for all the developers. That can be frustrating, and in some projects, people can just avoid to run tests because they don't know how to set up their environment. So if you have a centralized IDE, so this will automatically allow to have the same version of the tools that will be always updated for all the team. So everybody will be able to use exactly the same IDE, and the time to set up a new workspace for a new developer that is going to come will be close to zero. And Che is also can be considered as a missing part of the puzzle, because today with OpenShift, we have a platform that can distribute our application using with Docker images or with Git repositories. We can run our applications with some development, some runtime environments, and we can scale them thanks to Kubernetes. With Che, we can also build them, so we have an integrated tool to develop our application and to build it. So that's the last part of the puzzle. So now let's see how they work together. So we have seen how to run Che from the command line. Okay, so we just need Docker. So to run it on OpenShift, we'll just have to define a Che template. So that's not really hard to do. We just we need to have a privilege container that will need to run. So the application, the Che application, will need privilege permission to be able to run on OpenShift, because when Che is going to start a new workspace, you will need to access the Docker API. When you need to get the data from the file system, you will need the access to a host path volume. When you need to communicate with the browser, you will need to open a port that is not port 80 or 443. So for these three reasons, we will need to deploy a privileged application for Che. But that's not a big deal, so we are going to demo it. So let's just stop the Che that was running on Docker, and let's now start it on OpenShift. Okay, so I'm running everything locally. So I've got a mini shift here running with a project that I call Eclipse Che, and I want to deploy a new application here. So I've already installed the template that will allow me to deploy Che. So when I select add new application, I will find it. So I select it, Eclipse Che. There are some information that's a form that we can fill with the configuration of Che. So we are going to take the defaults here, and we're going just to select create. So once we have done that, we will have a new pod that is going to be deployed. And if we select it, we'll be able to see the logs of the underlying container. So that's the Tomcat application that it's starting our web IDE. Okay, so it seems started. So once it's started, we will be able to open it here. Okay, so it seems as the other instance that we had started before, but now it's running on OpenShift. So it's a pod that it's running on OpenShift. So the problem now is that, so the first thing that we would like to do is that when we're going to start a new workspace, we would like Che to use the OpenShift API. We don't want Che to use the Docker API. So it makes sense, since it's running on OpenShift, that you use that. So what we have done since a few months, we have been working on removing the need for the Docker connector, and adding the support for the OpenShift API. So we have re-implemented the Docker connector. We have implemented for the OpenShift API. And so with the version that it's running here locally is not already in the upstream project, we can create a new workspaces that actually will be a new OpenShift pod. So let's see it. Let's close that. Okay, let's select this one. Let's create it. So once we create that, we should see that there is a new pod that it started. So we are actually using OpenShift API here. We're not talking with the Docker API anymore. We can group them together. Okay. So that will be exactly the same stuff that we have seen before. So that's cool. And what we are going to do now is, so we have been working on that. We have opened a pull request on the upstream project to integrate the support for OpenShift on Eclipse Che. And so what we are going to do now, we have been, the review of this pull request has lasted a couple of weeks now. And so yesterday we got the approval, so we are going to just merge now the pull request. So since tonight, the nightly build of tonight will have OpenShift support for Eclipse Che. So this is the pull request. As you see, we had got a lot of discussion. That's a pull request that has been opened by Ilya. That is one of the Red Hat developers that is working on Che. Okay. So there is a check that it's failing, but it's just a bug on the check for the IP validation, the Eclipse ID validation. So what we I don't have to make a mistake here, otherwise it will be Alex that won't be happy. So I will rebase and merge. Let's do that. Let's see it again. Okay. Okay. So we have finally merged that. So what we have seen today, you will be able to do that tomorrow with just using the nightly build of the Eclipse Che image. But we're not going to stop here, because we still need to finalize the OpenShift implementation. There are some Docker API that haven't been replaced. For example, some API to build images that are inside. So Che build Docker images. So we are now the last week we are working on that. We are working also on removing the OS path. So we are going to use persistent volumes and volume claims. And we are also going to use to change the architecture of the networking architecture of the workspaces, so that they will use port 80 to communicate with the browser. So there will be just one port that will be exposed, and so that will allow Che to be run behind firewalls and with OpenShift without privilege. So this is the team. Actually, I think that there are a couple of people more that I need to update that, but we are growing and we need more people. So if you're interested, just you can ping us. And I've also added some links. There is the link to the pull request if you're interested in what we are doing. There is also a blog post from last year on the integration of OpenShift and Che, and so the template that we have used to deploy Che on OpenShift before. That's something that's not on the upstream project yet. So this JSON file is not yet on the upstream project, because what we want to do is we want to extend the CLI that we saw before. So we will be able to like use a flag when we start it, like start dash OpenShift, and it will deploy that on an OpenShift instance using the template to deploy Che. Okay, so that's it. If you have any question, yeah.
Which kind of integration do you have now with this kind of pull request? I mean, you can run a new pod, so basically the Eclipse Che schedule a new pod, but also create, for example, the roles or the services for that pod?
Yeah, exactly. So, yes. So the question is, what does the integration means in respect to the pull request that we just merged? Let's just see that, because what we are merging is exactly the same code that I'm running now. So we can see from the here we can just have a look to the service. So you see all the services. So this service is created with all these ports exposed. So this is automatically done from the code that we have. So all this is, so we create a deployment config service and yes, and the route to. So probably so the next step will be to have a different route for every workspace, and so to avoid exposing ephemeral ports.
I have a question. So I didn't see, how is authentication done in this shaping? How can you protect it if you run it on OpenShift and it's available to everybody? Let's say. So is there any authentication?
No, we're thinking about that, but you probably need what you need to do today is you have to integrate with some kind of reverse proxy to put in front of that, like eCloak or Nginx. So, but there is on the upstream project there is no support for authentication now. So, but that's a good question. That's absolutely something that we want to address. But first of all, we want to be able to run Che as a completely non-privileged application on OpenShift. That's the first thing we need to do. Yeah.
I would have a question. How are currently solved the persistent volumes, or how are you dealing with persistence in the Che in regard to the workspaces?
Yes. So the question is, how are we dealing with persistence for the workspaces? So if we destroy Che now, so the pod, etc., and we restart it, we will find again all the workspaces that we had created before. We're using OSPAT volumes. So we should see that here. Okay, so you can see that we have all these volumes. Eventually, we want to. So one of the 3 points that we want to address in the next week. So it will be probably at the end of the month or of this month or at the end of February or the beginning of March, is to have a second pull request that will remove the need of the OSPAT and will be using so the persistent volumes to do so, and remove also the volume for the Docker socket. So that's something that we still need because we haven't implemented all the Docker API. We haven't removed the need for all the Docker API. So we're going to remove that as soon as we have implemented all the OpenShift connector, and we're going also to use persistent volumes for the workspace data, so that because the drawback with OSPAT volumes is that you need to run Che on one host, because OSPAT is tied to one host, so it doesn't make it scalable yet. As soon as we use persistent volumes, we really can run it on a cluster, and so it will be.
So let me clarify. on the same node as the Che is running.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Just about like, is there a plan to ship this once it's ready with OpenShift, like just like as a template out of the box?
So the question is if there is a plan to distribute Che as an OpenShift application with the template. So yes, the answer is yes. So we have a task that we should start working in the next weeks that will extend the CLI that we saw before. So that's something that is in the upstream project. So currently, what the upstream project does is when you do a Eclipse Che start, it creates a Docker Compose file on the fly and run a Docker Compose. So that's how it works. So what we are going to do, we are going to extend that, and we're going to generate a Che template for OpenShift with the parameters based on the current configuration instance of Che, and we're going to deploy it. So we already have some script to do that, so it's just a matter to include that and merge that, integrate that on the upstream project CLI. So yes, the question is we're going to have it really soon. And we need it because it makes easy to deploy Che on OpenShift. So the question is how much code is reused from the desktop IDE, Eclipse IDE, and if we can reuse plugins. Unfortunately not. I mean, we can't reuse plugin. There are some parts of Eclipse code that are reused, but these are really tied to the autocomplete or some function, some feature of the IDE, and the architecture is completely different. We have a plugin system for Eclipse Che too, but that's not OSGI. That's nothing to do with the desktop Eclipse. So unfortunately, we can't reuse them.
And to add to that, my first question about like logins. This is like single user, right? The one Eclipse server, let's say, will run for one particular user. So if ever somebody logs in, they will all see the same thing. It's not like you cannot run one server and give different users different views of different workspaces.
No, there is no authentication. So the question is if there is a way to have some workspaces that just a group of people can see, and other workspaces that can be seen by other people. No, now there is no such a thing. So there is no authentication. So there is not the conception of a user inside Eclipse Che. So that's something that we cannot do. But again, if we put a reverse proxy in front of that, we can filter the user. So we can authenticate them and then filter what they can access.
So
yeah.
One other question. So is it possible to use Che as a collaborative environment, or is it not currently?
Yes, and I mean, if you want to share your URL of the workspace that you are using, you can do that. So you can deploy Che on the cloud, for example, on OpenShift, and then you can just say to somebody, "I've started working on that. Can you have a look at that?" Is going to your colleague is going to work on that and is going to change some files, and when you access the next time, you're going to see the changes. The problem is that if you access together at the same time, things won't work. I mean, you are going to the changes won't synchronize at the same time, so you will see later the changes of your colleague. So there have been some work and there are some demo of patched version of Che that allows to do remote pair programming. So with two cursors, so you can see the two as you when you're editing a Google Doc. So, but that hasn't been included on the upstream project yet because it like doubles the size of the Che artifact. So that's not something that we want to do yet. So, but eventually that's something that we were thinking about, and yeah, that would be cool. But now, so what you can do, you can share a URL of what you're working with, but you can't access this together. And if you share with somebody, if you share this link, everybody can access to your workspace.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I guess.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So we'll have like a break of 10 minutes and then we'll start the lightning talks for today.
That's the goal. So we are currently like 6 people from Red Hat working on that. So I was alone in June. So
Perfect.
yeah, and so we're trying to have an impact. So it's a difficult project if you try to contribute because the UI part is done in Git, so in Google in GWT, and so.
This is still like I thought it is not supported by Google anymore, like Google Web Toolkit.
Yeah, that's community driven.
Interesting, yeah, but it looks really nice. I'll try it out as well.
And so it will be part of